Go to the Farm Bureau phone line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Eric Sorensen joins us right now from D1Baseball.com. It's the most wonderful time of the year, Mr. Sorensen.
That's right. This is when I geek out the most. It's like Christmas Day happens every day of the postseason. So here we are. Happy holidays to all you boys there.
All right, asking a question on behalf of Ole Miss fans who were a little disgruntled with you last week, or at least didn't understand. You said, I think you wrote that you thought Ole Miss had to get to Sunday of the SEC tournament to host?
Yeah, what I wrote and what I meant, I owned up to it, actually. I think what I was trying to get at was Ole Miss was the most interesting team of probably the top 20 going into the conference tournaments because they could have gone so many directions because they started out as a 15 of the RPI, and like had they lost that first game or even just gone 1-2, they could have conceivably dropped out of the top 16.
Okay.
Or if they go all the way to the finals, they could move all the way up into the top 8. I don't think I owned up to it. I didn't get that out quite like I wanted to. And boy, the Ole Miss fans let me know, which I love. I was actually fine with that because, it gave me a chance to sort of clarify. But no, I wasn't intending to say that they needed to go to the championship just to host a regional. That was already kind of preconceived notion that they were going to, unless they really face planted. That was my only point. But
yeah, that seemed to
very well.
That seemed to be a little more good-natured back and forth than some of the exchanges that you were dealing with in the Twitters.com world last week. Let that be as it may. We'll leave it over to the side. Hey, before we jump into regionals, you were at the Maneri press conference on Friday last week, right?
Yeah, because I was in Louisiana covering some postseason tournaments there, and just by happenstance, Paul announced his retirement, so I was really glad to be able to go to that.
What'd you think?
Well, it's unique because I didn't know the things about his kind of health problems that had kind of become a point of contention for him and staying in the gig. But I think it was probably the right time to step down, and I kind of thought, and it's I'm sad to see him go. I always liked Paul, and I think that he really accomplished. I know LSU fans are a little prickly about some things with him, but yeah, I mean, he kept the program up at a high level, won a national championship in one of his first few years, and if we're going back a ways, took Notre Dame, a snow belt school, to the College World Series. So it's kind of hard to be harsh on the guy, and so yeah, I think he did a great job there, and I think also now this is what I was kind of giving thought to, Rich. Is maybe he announced his retirement before the selection committee came out, kind of like Mike Martin did. Well, Mike Martin did it prior to the season, but like Mike Martin did at Florida State, LSU, I wasn't certain they deserved an NCAA bid. I didn't think Florida State did in 2019. But then once they got in, they got now they have a focus and a chance to play for a coach, give him a good ride out. So we might see, ironically, a Mike Martin type of thing with Paul Maneri here at LSU going into the regionals because I don't think it's an impossible regional for them to win up at Oregon. It won't be easy, that's for sure, but it'll be interesting to see if they go on a run just like Mike Martin did where they eliminated LSU actually in that 2019 Super Regional. So interesting timing with the announcement, but again, great guy. I'm sorry to see him go. He was always really good with me and the media guys here at D1 Baseball.
The far more interesting question to me is where does LSU go next? Do you have we've seen names that are floating out there. Obviously, Sully at Florida's name is floated out there. Tony Vitello because of what he's done at Tennessee. Jim Schlossnagle at TCU because of what he's accomplished. It doesn't sound or feel like resources are going to be an issue, but I have argued that it is harder to go get a high-level baseball coach than people wanted to admit, even for the bluest of blue blood programs.
Sure. I mean, you look at Kevin O'Sullivan. I wonder his sanity if he leaves Florida to LSU because, and this is no slight against the Florida fans, but they're just not as rabid as LSU fans. LSU fans are going to let you know about it the minute you lose. They're going to let you know about it. Florida, they got better facilities now with that whole new stadium they built there. Kevin O'Sullivan had the Brinks truck backed up to him just a few years ago by Florida. So he doesn't have the pressure that he would at LSU, and that's why it's a little weird to me. But, yeah, so you're right. It makes it a lot tougher to get a coach to come in. And Schlossnagle was kind of the same way at TCU. I mean, it's not quite as rabid of a fan base as LSU. LSU's as hot as it gets for a seat when you start to lose or have a bad streak. That's for sure.
And two big jobs open with both A&M and LSU, both which have got seemingly unlimited resources. Who's your guess? Who's your guess for those two jobs?
You know, I've been hearing some with Jim Schlossnagle going down to Texas A&M. I think he just went through or to A&M. I'm sorry, A&M. I think Schlossnagle just went through a bad divorce, and so I don't know. His situation may have changed because his home was like 3 houses away from the stadium. They play at Lubbock Stadium, so it always made me wonder why he would leave there. But things have changed, and I also like Nate Thompson, an assistant at Arkansas, a guy I've kind of liked the last few years. I wouldn't be shocked to see if A&M or even an LSU might give him a look-see, because he's one of the up-and-coming assistants that you might want to look for. But everywhere else, it's pretty wide open. But it's going to be interesting to see how those two blue bloods with their fan bases. That's going to be a tough crowd to please.
What are you most looking forward to in weekend number 1 of the tournament? Is there a particular regional that stands out to you?
I think, the toughest regionals, I think, are the ones that, like, for instance, in your listening area, Ole Miss really got a tough regional compared to Mississippi State. I think Southern Miss getting sent there, and certainly Florida State, who is a blue blood of the sport, and they're postseason veterans, they were gonna make that one of the toughest regionals. And I also think Tennessee. I'm kind of just looking at some of the toughest regionals. I think there's a couple teams that kind of got red carpets, like Arkansas, and as a number 1, they probably should get one of the easy regionals. I think Mississippi State got a really easy regional. Texas did too. But when I'm looking at teams like Ole Miss and Tennessee and Arizona out west, I think those 3 got some of the toughest regionals out there, and that's kind of going to be the ones. But I think just kind of like a 30,000-foot view of this thing, Rich, I've had coaches tell me that this year is going to be just as wild as a year of any, just because of the whole COVID thing. It made teams like a Dallas Baptist or a Gonzaga, mid-majors, really, they really got a bunch of junior, senior guys back this year. So when you play with a lot of experienced guys, even though, the Power 5 teams did too, but those mid-majors really seem to be a much different animal when you get experienced teams. And I think that's what I'm kind of looking for more than anything else, seeing a little bit more, just a shade more mayhem than we normally do in the first weekend of the postseason. So let's see what happens with an eye towards some of those toughest regionals. Let's see what happens. That's what I think I'm looking for the most.
I asked Mike Rooney this question yesterday. I'll ask you again. Of the top 4 seeds, Arkansas the 1, Texas the 2, Tennessee the 3, and Vanderbilt the 4. So of those 4 teams, who is least likely, not most likely, least likely to find themselves playing in Omaha?
I'm going to go with Tennessee on that one. There's no knock against Petrino and company and the job they've done this year. They've got Duke as a number 2 seed, who's one of the hottest teams in the country. I said after the selections were made, I said NC State, UCLA, and Duke were the 3 most dangerous number 2 seeds out there, and Tennessee got one of them. And another thing with Tennessee, as opposed to Arkansas and Texas and Vanderbilt, certainly, they don't quite have, obviously, they don't have that postseason experience that those 3 programs do in recent years. So I think that's going to that might become a factor as well. So of those 4, which are all just great teams, I'm looking at Tennessee as being the one that's going to have the toughest road to hoe and have the hardest time getting to Omaha.
Eric, you're kind of our West Coast / small school baseball aficionado. When you look at the Tucson regional, which is the one that Ole Miss, the Oxford regional, is paired with, Arizona as the number 5 national seed, then Oklahoma State, who played in the Big 12 championship game, UC Santa Barbara, that nobody around here knows anything about, and Grand Canyon, that nobody really knows anything about. What's the likelihood that Arizona wins that?
That's a tough one because Arizona doesn't pitch it great. They rely on offense a lot, and they got a really big park too. There's a lot of triples hitting that in High Corbett Field. But here's the thing: Oklahoma State, dangerous number 2 seed as well. They're a team that could get on a tear. And I think if you want to get down to it, using Santa Barbara and Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is probably just so your listeners know, Grand Canyon is probably the toughest 4 seed out there. I think that's what might be a little bit problematic for Arizona. And UC Santa Barbara is a team that I think everybody early in the preseason rather, looked at their pitching rotation, said that's one of the best in the country. They haven't lived up to it all season long, but if they pitch up to their abilities, your listeners just need to know that they could very well be playing at Ole Miss next weekend, just if their pitching comes through. But it's kind of been Jekyll and Hyde with them. It all depends on if they put it together.